You know what's worse than being cheated on? Being cheated out of your entire life and not realizing it until you've lost yourself completely. Not just your money. Not just your freedom. But your voice, your worth, your truth. My name is Camille, and I didn't just fall for the wrong man. I signed a deal with the devil, and called it love. I met Daniel at the height of my glow-up. I had just launched my small design firm, was getting media features, and for once I felt like I was stepping into the woman I'd always dreamed of becoming. Independent. Confident. Whole. And then Daniel appeared, like something out of a perfectly timed romance novel. Tall, charismatic, the heir to a successful tech firm. The kind of man who commanded a room without even trying. When he looked at me, I felt like I was more than enough. Like I was the only one. He made falling feel easy. Our first date turned into a weekend in Napa. Then came surprise flowers, dinners under the stars, and whispered promises of forever. He told me he'd never met anyone who made him want to be a better man. I believed him. Because back then I needed to. When he proposed a year later in front of friends and family, I said yes with tears in my eyes. Not just because I loved him, but because I trusted him. But trust, I would learn, is the easiest thing to fake when you're wearing a $20,000 watch and a smile that lies for a living. A week before the wedding, Daniel brought up the prenup. It's nothing personal, he said, casually sliding the folder across the table. It's just standard. My father's lawyers insist on it. The folder was thick. The language inside cold. He made it seem like it didn't matter, like it was a routine paper to protect his family's legacy. He pulled me close, kissed my temple, and whispered, "You'll never need to worry about this. You're my forever." So, like a fool in love, I signed it. And with that signature, I handed him the weapon he would use to silence me for years. First, things were good. Honeymoon phase. Lavish vacations. Social events. A life that looked perfect from the outside. But perfection has a way of peeling at the seams, especially when it's built on power instead of partnership. Daniel started changing. He controlled what I wore, who I spoke to, how I spent my time. It wasn't obvious at first. It was subtle. Wrapped in charm and concern. "I just don't think your friends support your vision. That dress is too loud, babe, you're more elegant than that. Do you really need to keep working now that you're married?" It was always said with a smile. A kiss on the cheek. A glass of wine slid into my hand as a distraction. I gave up my business. I gave up my voice. And when I questioned him, when I pushed back, he'd wave the prenup in my face. "Don't forget what you signed, Camille," he'd say. "You leave, you get nothing. After everything I've given you, you'd walk away broke." He never had to raise his voice to make me feel small. It wasn't just manipulation, it was psychological warfare. The man I married slowly became my captor, and our house, a gilded prison. Friends drifted. My world shrunk. And I forgot who I was. But the worst part? I blamed myself. I thought maybe I wasn't being grateful enough. Maybe I was too sensitive. Maybe all marriages had some level of sacrifice. Maybe this was just what being someone's wife looked like. Until the night I found the envelope. Daniel had flown to New York for a business trip, but he left his home office unlocked. That was rare. He kept it like a vault, always closed, always private. But that night something pulled me inside. Inside the desk drawer, tucked under folders of company files, I found it. A copy of our prenup. But this one wasn't the same. The signatures looked off. Too perfect. Like they were scanned in. Not natural. Not real. My hand shook as I flipped through the pages. There were clauses I'd never seen. Sections that outlined financial control, asset limitations, even restrictions on reproduction rights. Things I never would have agreed to. I took photos of everything. Every page. Every signature. Every red flag. Then I made a call. An old friend from college, now a high-profile lawyer, agreed to meet me in secret. He looked over the documents for less than 5 minutes before his face darkened. "Camille," he said slowly, "this prenup was doctored. These aren't your signatures. It's a forgery. You've been manipulated into thinking you're powerless, but legally, you're not." And just like that, the fog lifted. The bars on my cage began to melt. Daniel hadn't just lied, he had built our marriage on fraud. Suddenly, I I wasn't the one trapped anymore. You'd think that finding out your entire marriage was built on a forged document would break you. And maybe for a moment it did. I remember walking out of that lawyer's office and just sitting in my car for hours. The world outside kept moving. Cars honking, people laughing on sidewalks, the sun sinking into the skyline. But inside me, everything had stopped. Daniel. The man who kissed my forehead every night. Who whispered lies into my ears so sweetly I called them lullabies. He didn't just betray me. He erased my choices. And the worst part? He almost got away with it. But that night I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I planned. The first step was pretending. Smiling through dinner. Kissing him goodnight. Pretending I was still the same woman he thought he had control over. I knew if I pushed too soon he'd lawyer up and spin his version first. Men like Daniel always do. So I became an actress in my own life. I played the doting wife. I asked him about his day. I made his favorite meals. I even agreed to attend his company's charity gala, something I hadn't done in over a year. That gala was step 2. I needed people to see me again. Not the version of me Daniel curated, the woman who stood behind him quiet and agreeable, but the real me. The Camille who once ran a thriving business. The woman who knew how to command a room without saying a word. I walked into that ballroom in a crimson dress I designed myself. It hugged every inch of the strength I had rebuilt in silence. Heads turned. Daniel's face froze. "Wow," he said, eyes scanning me like he didn't recognize the woman on his arm. I smiled, leaned in, and whispered, "You haven't even seen the best part yet." And then I introduced myself to every investor. Every guest with influence. Not as Mrs. Sinclair. But as Camille Reed, founder of CR Designs, soon to be relaunched. I saw the flicker in Daniel's eyes. He was confused. Threatened. But he didn't say a word. Because I wasn't fighting him. Not yet. What he didn't know was that I had already reactivated my LLC. Already rehired my 2 most trusted former staff. And already secured silent investors who believed in my comeback more than he ever believed in my worth. The night after the gala he tried to probe. "You're glowing lately," he said in bed, running his fingers through my hair. "I feel like myself again," I whispered back. He kissed my shoulder, but I could feel it. The shift. The tension. The fear that his control was slipping. And it was. The third step was gathering everything. Financial records. Bank statements. Phone logs. Emails. Every bit of evidence that proved Daniel wasn't just manipulative, but fraudulent. I met with my lawyer twice a week. Quietly. Thoroughly. I also found out something else. He had a mistress. Of course he did. Her name was Brittany. 26. Some influencer type who believed Daniel was separated. He had been funneling money to her through one of his shell companies. Money that technically belonged to his father's firm. So not only was he a liar, he was sloppy. But I wasn't interested in confronting him, not yet. Because the final piece wasn't just exposing him. It was reclaiming myself. I partnered with a luxury real estate developer. I pitched my brand as a design firm that specialized in personalized interiors for high-end clients. In less than 3 months I had 5 contracts. I was back in the game, but this time I wasn't playing for survival. I was playing to win. Daniel remained blissfully unaware, until the day he came home early and saw my design sketches laid out across the dining room table. "What's all this?" he asked. I looked up slowly. "Work. You're working again?" "Yes." He stared at the plans, and for the first time in months I didn't flinch under his gaze. "I thought we agreed you'd take a step back." "No," I said calmly. "You decided that. I just went along with it." He stepped closer. "Why now?" I met his eyes. "Because I remember who I am." And I swear in that moment the fear returned to his eyes. Not the kind born from violence, but from power slipping through his fingers. The kind of fear narcissists get when their mask starts to crack. The next morning I filed for divorce. I had everything in place. The forged prenup. The financial fraud. The mistress. The manipulation. And I didn't just serve him papers, I served him notice. The Camille he married? She's gone. The woman standing before him now? She came to collect. I used to think the worst pain came from being yelled at. From slammed doors, raised voices, and cruel words spoken in anger. I was wrong. The real pain? It's the silence. The kind that seeps in between the moments of fake peace, where you feel yourself disappearing while they pretend everything's fine. That was my life for years with Daniel. A performance. A polished lie wrapped in expensive clothes, empty compliments, and designer furniture. He thought I was weak because I played along. Because I smiled through the pain. Because I let him control the narrative. But what he didn't realize was that I had been taking notes all along. The day I filed for divorce, I didn't cry. I didn't even flinch when I handed those papers to the courier. I had rehearsed that moment too many times in my head to let emotion ruin it. And I made sure they were delivered to his office, right in the middle of his biggest investor meeting. I wasn't doing it to embarrass him. I was doing it to remind myself that I wasn't afraid anymore. When the papers landed on his desk, I was already halfway out of the city. I'd packed a small bag, left the house keys on the counter, and turned off my phone. I needed distance. I needed silence. My own kind this time, not his suffocating kind. And for the first time in years, I breathed freely. I stayed in a little coastal town for a few weeks. No press. No lawyers. Just me, my journal, and the sound of waves hitting the shore. It was there I started piecing together the woman I had forgotten. The one who used to dream. The one who used to laugh. But the world didn't stay quiet for long. By the time I came back, the media had caught wind of the prenup scandal. I never spoke to anyone, never released a statement, but people were talking. And Daniel? He was spiraling. He called. Texted. Emailed. Said it was all a misunderstanding. Said he loved me. But the thing about liars is, they can't help but rewrite the story once they start losing control of it. I never responded. Instead, I put my energy into rebuilding my business. CR Designs had been a passion project before I met him. Something I shelved because he said it was cute, but not sustainable. Well, now it was my lifeline. I rebranded, reached out to past clients, and threw myself into the work like it was the only thing keeping me sane. And in a way it was. Then came the hotel project. An old luxury chain wanted a complete brand revamp, and someone had whispered my name. I pitched. I presented. And I landed it. It was the kind of job that got you noticed. Not just in design circles but in business magazines, industry panels, and investor meetings. And every time someone praised the work, every time they told me how brilliant the concept was, I smiled. Not because of the recognition but because I knew Daniel was watching. He had spent years telling me I was lucky to have him. That no one else would put up with me. That I wasn't capable of running anything on my own. But now he was the one drowning. A few weeks later, I got a call from a journalist. Someone from a major publication wanted a quote about the prenup. Apparently, one of Daniel's own colleagues had leaked everything. How the signatures were forged, how the assets were moved behind my back, how I had been manipulated from day one. I declined to comment. I didn't need to defend myself. The truth was already loud enough. And the world? It was finally listening. By the time his company launched an internal audit, Daniel had already started to unravel. His name disappeared from the firm's homepage. His calendar was suddenly wide open. And in the meetings where he used to sit at the head of the table, now he sat quietly in the back. I heard about it from a friend who still worked there. She said he looked smaller. Quieter. Like someone who had lost the script and didn't know how to improvise. Meanwhile, I was thriving. My inbox overflowed with offers. Collaborations, speaking events, brand features. People wanted to know how I came back stronger. How I turned a scandal into a springboard. But I never told them the full story. Not because I was protecting him, but because I was protecting myself. I didn't want my future tied to his name any longer. I didn't want to be the woman who escaped Daniel Hayes. I wanted to be Camille Rivers, the woman who built herself from the ashes. And that's exactly who I became. One night, as I was reviewing the final mock-ups for a new client, I saw a familiar name pop up on my screen. Daniel. He'd emailed me. The subject line was simple. Can we talk? I didn't open it. I didn't need closure from the man who broke me. Because I wasn't broken anymore. I had rebuilt myself without him. without his money, without his lies. And that was more powerful than anything he could ever say. It's strange how people expect you to fall apart when you walk away from someone powerful. They think you'll shrink, crumble, come crawling back. But what they don't realize is, some of us were never broken to begin with. We were just buried under someone else's shadow. That's how I felt after I ignored Daniel's email. Lighter. Freer. Like the chains I didn't even realize were wrapped around my ankles had finally shattered. The funny thing was, the moment I stopped needing his validation, I started receiving the kind of recognition I had only ever imagined. Within months, Sierra Designs wasn't just back. It was booming. I hired a small but mighty team of women who, like me, had stories of being underestimated. Some had taken breaks from corporate life to raise children and returned to closed doors. Others were passed over for promotions, told they weren't leadership material. I didn't just give them jobs. I gave them space to reclaim their brilliance. We worked out of a bright, glass-walled office with plants in every corner and sunlight flooding the space. My version of a sanctuary. Every time I walked through that door, I felt proud. Not just of the business, but of the woman I had become. And that's when something unexpected happened. I met someone. His name was Marcus. We bumped into each other at a charity gala I almost didn't attend. He wasn't flashy or loud. He didn't lead with ego. He listened, asked questions. And when I told him about my company, he didn't raise an eyebrow or ask if I had help. He simply asked what inspired me. At first I kept my guard up. I'd been too close to someone who used charm like a weapon. But Marcus was different. There was no manipulation. No games. Just a steady presence, a quiet strength that made me feel seen. Not for what I'd been through, but for who I had become. We started seeing each other slowly. Coffee dates. Art galleries. Walks in the park. It was simple. Healing. And for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid to let someone in. One afternoon, while we sat on a bench watching kids play in the distance, he turned to me and said, "You don't carry your past like it owns you. That's rare." That's when I realized he didn't see me as someone broken. He saw me as someone brave. Meanwhile, Daniel's life continued to unravel. I didn't go searching for updates, but they found me anyway. Through whispers in business circles, mutual acquaintances, and headlines that hinted at lawsuits, failed ventures, and silent exits. He tried to launch a new firm, something sleek and modern, but his reputation had followed him like a storm cloud. Investors backed out. Partners walked away. The charm that once opened every door now left him alone in empty boardrooms. One day, my assistant handed me a package that had no return address. Inside was a handwritten letter. It was from Daniel. He apologized. Said he was sorry for the lies, for the manipulation, for everything. That he never stopped admiring me. That he hoped I could find it in my heart to forgive him. I read it once, then again. Not because I was considering his words, but because I was trying to feel something. And I didn't. Not anger. Not sadness. Just nothing. That's when I knew I'd finally healed. I didn't need to reply. I didn't need to call him or send back a message. My silence was the answer. My happiness was the closure. The fact that he no longer had power over my peace was the most powerful thing of all. Later that week, I stood on another stage, this time in front of thousands, speaking about resilience, identity, and rising after the fall. My story was no longer about surviving Daniel Hayes. It was about becoming Camille Rivers, a woman who turned betrayal into brilliance. And I ended my talk the same way I'll end this story. To every woman who's ever been lied to, silenced, underestimated, or made to feel small, remember, you are not what they tried to break. You are what you choose to rebuild. Like, comment, share, and subscribe if you believe no one gets to write your story but you.